What's up, guys? Today I'm going to be talking about facts versus emotions and how to handle emotions and how that relates to MGTOW. Um, and I'm going to draw some very sort of abstract points in this. So I promise to sort of tie everything together by the end, but for comprehension purposes, I advise and ask that you please stay to the end and watch this, as it's likely to throw off some people in the beginning. But it's sort of as I walk you through the logic behind it, I can almost guarantee you that you'll understand it by the end. That being said, emotions, right? Emotions should determine your conclusions, and logic should determine your reasoning, or rather, the mental trajectory you take to get to those conclusions. What I see in men nowadays is all conclusion with an incorrect trajectory, a wrong path, a wrong course, a wrong way of getting there, if you will, a sort of a lack of solid logic. And it's well documented that people ultimately make decisions based on emotion. For example, some may disagree and say for logical reasons, you shouldn't give all your money away. But that decision to do so is ultimately determined by emotion, seeing as the likely result of you giving your money away would be that you become poor, maybe even homeless or dead. But despite how quote unquote logical or illogical, that decision may seem, you're making that decision because you don't like or you don't emotionally favor the prospect of poverty or even homelessness or death. Now, logically speaking, there is nothing inherently wrong with death. It sort of exists and it just exists and has no inherent connotation or value. Humans give it value and give it its connotation because emotionally we deem life better than death. But there are instances, for example, in human euthanasia, in which death is emotionally preferred over life, right? Now, logic, on the other hand, is a way of reasoning. And reasoning is independent, or I should say, reasoning is dependent on constants and variables. And these constants and variables create reality. And from that reality, a person's emotions are triggered, certain conclusions are made, and certain action is taken from those conclusions. For example, one variable is that I have $1 in my pocket. Why is that a variable? It's a variable because on any given day I could have $3 in my pocket or $5. And variables by definition are subject to change. The other variable is that I haven't drank anything in 4 days. That's a variable because on any given day, I may be hydrated. The constant, though, is that 3 to 5 days without water will kill a person. That's a constant because it doesn't change and it isn't relative. It's a derivative of biology which applies to everyone. That mix of variables and constants creates reality. And reality is simply a circumstance sort of made by certain variables and constants. So my reality is that I've gone 3 days without water. I have $1 and I'll die shortly if I don't rehydrate myself. Now, based on this reality, I'll likely choose to spend my dollar on the water because I emotionally value life more than death, and therefore I don't want to die. Now, bear in mind, my decision only becomes logical. My decision to spend my dollar on the water only becomes logical when I emotionally determine that my desired outcome is life and not death. See, if I were to determine emotionally that I value death over life, then buying the water wouldn't be logical, as the water would cause me to live, not die. So logic in that instance is predicated, or rather I should say in this instance, is predicated on whether the desired emotional outcome, or what the desired emotional outcome is. I mean, and even in mathematics, logic is determined by the sum. For example, if 4 is the desired outcome, right? The desired sum, then 2 plus 2 is logical. 2 plus 3 would be illogical because it's not on par with the desired outcome, the sum. If you notice, 2 plus 2 provides the trajectory, the course, the way to get 4, which is the conclusion, the sum. So from now on, I guess I could refer to emotion as sort of the determinant of our conclusions, and thus ultimately the fuel for our behavior. So from that, I can say that when we as men say we only focus on reality, and assert that women only focus on emotion, we don't realize that our emotions, our behavior, when in congruence with biology, shapes reality. And so it then becomes more evident as to why we're living in the reality of women in terms of relationships. We sort of yield to the reality of women by yielding to their behavior. And you can see this everywhere. We're focused on living within reality, not determining reality. We'd rather be affected by reality, not affect reality, you know? In my last video, I sort of mentioned this, or alluded to this. I talked about, the men who stand in stores holding bags, waiting for their wife to spend all their hard-earned money. But, this is because these men yield to the behavior of their wives, not the other way around. So if yielding to the reality of women, and thus their emotions and behavior, is how we manage to create such an unfavorable reality, the unfavorable reality we have today, then logically we need to begin sort of making women yield to our reality and thus our behavior, while still staying in congruence with our biological nature. But it's more in depth than that, ultimately, because look, we can't change the constants of reality, such as male and female biology. So there's no need in even trying. But remember, constants and variables still make up reality. So we need to be in congruence with biology when determining our behavior, to ensure that our actions logically produce a favorable reality. And I hate to use math, but math is precise and absolute. In the equation 2 plus x equals 4, 2 is the constant and x is the variable. The sum 4 represents our goal, which is a more favorable reality with regards to relationships. 2, because it's the constant and doesn't change, represents biology. So the variable x, which represents our variable behavior, needs to be compatible with the constant in order to equal a favorable reality, which is 4. Being that 2 plus x equals 4, there's only one possible answer to x. X is 2, making the equation logical. Again, if x equaled 3, the equation would be illogical because 2 plus 3 doesn't equal 4. And if feminists in particular don't realize that men are not biologically attracted to nasty women who don't give up sex. So their behavior isn't in congruence with biology, which leads to sort of an unfavorable reality for them. See, most women, the women that get the higher quality, if you will, men, most women understand this, and that's why as men, we often live in their reality. It's biological nature for a man to sexually desire a woman. And a woman realizes that a life without protection and provision would make her emotionally unhappy. So in flaunting her sexuality, that's in congruence with biology, because she's emotionally decided that she doesn't want to go without the protection and provision offered by a man and ultimately his money. By acknowledging the constant, which is biology, and realizing that men, or rather what men are attracted to, women make sort of the necessary adjustments and adapt their behavior, which is a derivative of their emotions, to get their desired reality. Notice feminists don't have a desirable reality. It's because they try to make reality yield to their emotions. They try to make the constant yield to the variable. They want the money and provision, but don't want to offer their fertility, if you will, and improve their attractiveness, as biology, would suggest. And so ultimately, this means, since biology is constant and our actions need to be in congruence with biology, that the problem can only lie, if there is a problem, in our incongruence with biology. And it's more clear than ever that the feminized male culture has got to go. It came from feminists who are, who are fundamentally out of line with biology. So is there really any question as to why yielding to their reality is making the vast majority of men undesirable to women? And I know for so long we've tried to play the badass card and act as though we're going to jam who we think we should be as men down the throats of women and have them accept it. But feminists are doing that to men. They're doing that to us, and we're rejecting it. So how do we figure that will work for us with women? It's simply not biologically what women are attracted to. And I know the obvious question is, well, who cares what women want? And I get it, right? Because, to an extent, I don't care at all. But realize, when your variable actions are in line with the constants of reality, you begin to control that reality, or at least you can begin to control that reality. For example, if you desire to reach the moon, there's certain steps you have to take. You can only do so if you're in congruence with the laws of gravity. If you desire to go deep sea diving, for example, you can only do so if you're in congruence with your body's biological need for oxygen and tolerable pressures. So if you emotionally desire to win with women, you can only do so if you're in congruence with biology's composition of men and women. And so we need to start realizing that our biological composition as men has everything to do with dominance and control, whereas a woman's has everything to do with the opposite, which is submission and amenability. Now, the argument against this is that gender roles are a social construct, right? You hear that all the time. And to some extent, they are, concerning women in different natures or rather different nations and cultures play different roles in society. But I mean, can we honestly say with the utmost sincerity that there aren't very defined biological intentions that become blatantly evident when even a mere glance at the human male and female body is taken? I mean, physiologically, men have more muscle, right? Women have more fat. Body fat content for women is on average 25% compared to just 15% for men. Now, studies have shown this for a multitude of reasons, but the most notable reasons being child conception, child nourishment, and even childbirth. So this is extremely telling in and of itself. A woman is pregnant 9 months out of the year. And so are feminists, in particular, implying that a male who holds all the muscle, or rather most of the muscle, is supposed to somehow sit back as the pregnant woman goes out and hunts the woolly mammoth, hunts the saber-toothed tiger? I mean, and that's just one example, So although there are parts of gender roles that are absolutely social constructs, these gender roles are derived from an intrinsic biological propensity, which is why non-adjacent societies, particularly in third world countries, but I guess we could even say in primitive countries, have a strikingly similar a gender role sort of composition, similar to the US. And I'd hate to sound like somewhat of an ass, but the Muslim and Asian societies, which we heavily rebuke for having, overly stringent views of gender roles, And in many cases, purely draconian views of gender roles. This is why they don't have the issues we have with, regard to gender roles and social or societal movements that sort of butt up against our biological nature. They don't have that problem with feminism. They don't have that problem with the feminization of men. And that's not at all. That's not an endorsement of any sort of violence against women or men, or any withdrawal of their rights or freedoms. It's more so just pointing out that the more the constant, in this case being biology, is incorporated and considered in the manifestation of a society's collective emotions towards gender roles, which ultimately become, cultural customs that shape the overarching reality in that society. The more biology is adhered to, the less likely they are to experience the negative disturbances we've experienced as Americans with regards to relationships between men and women that we experience today. And I mean, look at every culture of which feminism has affected. You'll see that it's predominantly, first of all, if not entirely, Western culture. But, Western culture in particular, the birth rates in Western societies are abysmal. This is what happens when we don't ground ourselves. We don't ground our variable emotions, ground our conclusions in fact and in logic. This is what happens when we don't completely forego, or rather, when we completely forego the constant in reality, that is, in this case, biology. And this is because collectively, we're in constant contention with biology, almost as if it has no hold, no bearing on us. We allow our emotionally derived actions, which should be in congruence with the laws of reality, with the constant laws of reality, to instead contend with those laws for precedence. So in short, something has to change. For the sake of society, for the sake of the country, something has to change, And this is the next thing I'll say probably, I don't know if I should say that or not. I guess I will. It's sort of for a different video, but I don't think Western society as a collective, but especially America, where I live, is going to last in the coming years with regard to maintaining social order. I see too many signs akin to the signs that sort of heralded the collapse of the Holy Roman Catholic Empire. You have intrigue in the government, resentment between the sexes, growing, political and social partisanship. And that's beginning to taunt and dare the coming of war, if you will, civil war, to be honest. We have staggering amounts of debt. Staggering amounts of debt, and that's not even touching unfunded liabilities. I mean, and speaking of, Catholicism, I could go into a 95 thesis on all the problems with the U.S. and the West, but nevertheless, we got to sober up. We got to sober up quick. But to be quite honest, I don't think there's much we could do, in the way of stopping what's already been set up. But, nevertheless, I'll sort of wrap this video up on that note, All right, guys, subscribe and share. By the way, I've been loving the feedback you guys have been giving in the comment sections. You guys are awesome for that. I really like to hear what you guys like to think. I've been trying to get back to all of you guys individually, but there's just so many comments. It's becoming impossible to do that. And I asked for a lot of comments. I asked for that engagement. So I guess you ask for, or I guess you receive what you ask for, right? What's the saying? Ask and you will receive. Accidentally, there's some house cleaning I got to take care of. I'm on Patreon now, all right? I think that's what it's called. Patreon. Yeah, Patreon. I'm on Patreon now. So I'll post the link in the description if you guys want to help out and think of some cool incentives. Because I'm shit out of ideas, to tell you the truth. That being said, that wraps it up. Take care and go get them.